Just north of a small town in Louisiana called Tallulah, the Delta Southern Short Line Railroad creeps its way northward after picking up some tank cars from its interchange. A few miles out of McGehee, Arkansas, G&W Short Line, the Arkansas and Midland, is also slowly heading back towards its interchange and locomotive shops. Departing Lake Village, Arkansas, we see a vintage SW1 switcher locomotive of the North Louisiana and Arkansas Railroad with its northbound cottonseed cars. Now I bet you're probably wondering, why am I showing you these seemingly random clips of these Louisiana and Arkansas short lines moving at almost a snail's pace? Well, would you believe that many decades ago, all of these short lines were once part of the same route that hosted a high-speed streamliner? Welcome to our latest edition of our What Once Was series, where we take a look back in time at how the railroads of North Louisiana and its surrounding areas were like in decades past. Today's subject, one of the smallest streamliners to ever run in the United States, the Missouri Pacific's Delta Eagle. You know, it's hard for me to think that there was once an era where passenger service was offered on a majority of rail routes throughout the country. So when a friend of mine told me that the Mopac created a passenger service that ran from Memphis, Tennessee to small-town Tallulah, Louisiana, well, you can imagine my surprise. Starting on May 11th, 1941, daily passenger service began between the small Louisiana town and the home of the Blues, a 259-mile route. The total amount of time per trip was about 6.5 hours if it remained on schedule. It would depart out of Memphis southbound at 4:30 in the afternoon and arrive into Tallulah by 10:55 p.m. For northbound trips, the Delta Eagle would head out of Tallulah at 6:15 in the morning and arrive in Memphis by 12:35 p.m., just in time for lunch. Major stops in between the two included Marianna, Helena, Lakeview, McGehee, and Lake Village. Helena was the largest city on the route besides Memphis, with a population of a little more than 8,500 in the early 1940s. Helena was located at the end of a branch line, which would require the Delta Eagle to perform a shove move coming into town. Like I said earlier, the Delta Eagle was a very small train. In fact, the Mopac advertised it as the smallest streamliner to exist. Aside from its locomotive, only 2 passenger cars were coupled behind it. From my research, I was not able to find any reports on the success of the train or really any specific numbers on passenger volume throughout the years. It must not have been the most successful because in October 1954, the E-Unit and its coaches would be taken off the Delta Eagle service. The single E-Unit that was in charge of hauling the Delta Eagle was truly a one-of-a-kind locomotive. At first glance, Missouri Pacific number 7100 looks pretty much identical to a standard E6 locomotive. The official model designation is an EMCAA. 7100 was built in 1940, the year prior to the inauguration of the Delta Eagle. One of the only cosmetic differences you'll notice is on the back half of the locomotive. You'll see the square windows. These square windows were common for the E6 on other roads, but for the Mopac, the circular porthole was the standard. The major differences come from the interior of the locomotive. A typical E6 locomotive would have 2 EMD 567 V12 prime movers and have 2,000 horsepower. Number 7100 was essentially half an E6 with only a single prime mover inside that could give off 1,000 horsepower. I mean, with only 2 passenger cars to haul throughout the relatively flat Delta regions from Memphis to Tallulah, there was no need for a fully equipped E-Series locomotive on the train. Once being removed from the Delta Eagle in 1954, it was sent to El Dorado, Arkansas to work local passenger service to Monroe, Louisiana for a little while, and then Gurdon, Arkansas for a few years. Eventually, it would be retired and scrapped in the early 1960s. After the impressive one-of-a-kind locomotive was removed from service, the Delta Eagle would fall from grace significantly. From Memphis to Helena, a bus service would take over, and from Helena to McGehee, a new source of rail transport would take over the operations. South of McGehee towards the original terminus of Tallulah would have no substitution for the lack of rail service to my knowledge. Anyway, the new power was a motor car number 670, nicknamed the Eaglet. This 75-foot-long piece of machinery would travel on a portion of the route for several years until February 27, 1960, the official end of the Delta Eagle. I hope you enjoyed this video on this very unique streamliner. It's clear why this small train is overlooked thanks to the Mopak's other more well-known services, but nonetheless it is still a very interesting subject. If you enjoy the What Once Was series, leave a like down below. I have several things I'd like to cover for my region, but if you have any suggestions at all, leave a comment down below. I'll see you somewhere out there on the rails, and as always, thanks for watching.